takes a couple of minutes. Okay, you're on.
All right, this week we are going to pick up with Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 13, verse 21 or 2. Do we remember? 22. Okay, so to back up a little bit so we know where we're starting here. 21 said, and if the priest looks and behold, none of the hair is white, and the spot is not lowered from the skin, and it has, or maybe I should say, but it is darkened, the priest will quarantine him for 7 days. So what we're last 2 weeks are different variables of, this can happen, but that doesn't happen. That happens, but this didn't happen. So they're the differing variables of the things that do and do not happen to people that have this skin issue. Last week we left off with, well, he doesn't have the white hair in this spot, and it doesn't look deeper, it doesn't look like it's deep into the skin. It just seems superficial. That's a word we should have been using. It seems superficial. But it is turning pretty dark, so let's quarantine the guy, right? So then the next verse says, Ve'im paso tifaseh ba'or ve'time hakohen oto negahi. So, well, we've really already had all of these words, and there's nothing really new here. So the translation I'm just going to go to is, and if, ve'im, and if, spreads out. Because what it says is spread shall spread. If spread shall spread. And that's more like saying if it greatly spreads out. Then it says in the skin, the Kohen will pronounce him unclean. It is, we'll say, an open sore. It's a wound. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that we can say here. But what we can't say is that this is this thing, Zara'at, or leprosy as it's known these days. Because all of this is you had this sore spot and it has turned really dark in the skin, and now it seems to be spreading. You have more sore spots, and there are more of these dark spots in your skin. So you're going to, at this point, be pronounced unclean because this thing's getting worse. And we don't know at this point. It's starting to look like if it's spreading, then that means that it is, what's the word when other people contagious. Because I think that's what Zara'at means. I mean, I really think that it means contagious. And it's not that it's the title of some specific disease. Although, since there's so many specific things, it has to be raised and dark and have the white hair and et cetera, blah, 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 and so on. It would seem, well, that's a specific condition, right? Well, not necessarily. It's just, to my mind, it would be saying with all of those things put together, and remember we had the list of those a couple of weeks ago. Well, all those things put together, what we now know is not the name of a disease, but we now know that it is contagious, highly contagious if you have all these things. And I really think that that's what Zara'at means. Nobody can actually say for sure because it's a very obscure Hebrew word. It is only used in a couple of places, and it's of this stuff. And so, unfortunately, until we find some, cache of writing that talks about this and maybe explains some of the things that we can't know, we can't know. All right, but that's my best guess, and maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. It's not going to hurt my feelings if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong and someone can prove me wrong, then we'll both be right. That's the way I look at things. All right, so verse 23. It says, Ve'im, and if, Tachteha ta'amod ha-baheret lo fasata zarevet ha-shechen hiv veti haro hakohen. Believe it or not, we've already had all of these words. There's nothing new here either. So what we're going to look at is then, and if the bright spot it shall stand is what it says. That means remains unchanged. If it stands, it hasn't changed, right? So it's an idiom. There's an awful lot of idioms in the law. I wish that people who taught the law knew that. But for the most part, well, actually, I have never met any teacher of the law who's ever recognized more than one or two. And they're all throughout it. But I better not get into that. All right, so if it remains and has not spread. So remember, this isn't this well, maybe not remember, but this is a new variable. It's going to be the last one of that particular bunch, but this is the final variable that we're looking at. And if the bright spot remains unchanged, if it stands and has not spread. So see, a while ago you had a while ago we were talking about the dark spot spreading, but now we're back to the bright spot where we started. But if that hasn't changed, if it hasn't spread, and the boil has scabbed over, the colon will pronounce him clean. I'm really glad that they break this stuff up. I know that it can be confusing, especially when you're breaking it up over several weeks, and in our case, more weeks than it should have been because we had some video not work and I had to reteach it and stuff like that. But you can go and watch today's message and the two previous to it that I think I forgot to tell everybody, but we're back up on Google. Don't know how long they'll leave us there with my thoughts and issues, but we are back up on Google, and so we've got some new stuff that's going up on there. And so this one and the previous two, put them all together, it'll help you to kind of keep up with all of these variables that we just went through, because now we have a different scenario, which in the end is another variable. But you can have a variable with variables inside it, right? A variable that has variables. And you can have a list of variables that break down into variables that break down into variables. Variables can go on endlessly, right? Well, that's kind of what's happening here. And if we don't break it up properly and recognize when it's a new set, a new scenario, well, we're going to miss a few things. Unfortunately, too many things in the Hebrew Bible by the translators and the teachers get split up in places they shouldn't be. And generally, it's the opposite of what I'm doing here. We break up things in a way they shouldn't be broken up. For instance, in the chapter in Exodus where it talks about not seething a kid in its mother's milk, not boiling it, seething, I think is the English word they used back in the old days. So you still see that in the Bibles of today, the newer ones. Yeah, the problem that I have with that is that everything that precedes that verse is talking about kind of you look at it and say, well, they're talking about honesty. Everything is about don't be dishonest, but it's a little more than that. It's about what is right. What is it's talking about balance. It's if you lie, you tip the scales and you're out of balance. And if you treat somebody even if you treat a poor person, who's done something wrong, you're more lenient on him than you would be on a rich person. That's wrong. And then it says that's out of balance. And it says if you treat the rich person better because he's rich, that's out of balance. So it's all about balance, right? And then all of a sudden you get to the kid thing and it's about hamburgers and pizza. And then after that, we get back to balance, balance, balance. Read it sometime. See if you see what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, we just have this verse that just takes off in some completely different direction and has nothing to do with balance. Because after you get past that, it starts talking about the leaving the part of your field and all that kind of stuff. And if you read it, knowing that this is about balance, you'll realize God's still talking about balance. He never stopped. So the seeding of the kid is an idiom, and it has something to do with balance. When you get the proceeds of your work and you don't give God that money immediately, you don't give God his tithe first, your life is out of balance. And that unbalance of your life is like seeding a kid in its mother's milk. That does not mean, it doesn't have anything to do with us not being able to eat cheese on a hamburger. Now, I'll admit, I don't like it, but um, and I only know that because I used to when I was much younger and more hedonistic. But I always order a cheeseburger, hold the cheese. If you want to mess with somebody in a restaurant, order it that way, which is what I like to do. When I have a hamburger, I don't remember the last time I had one, but I like to do that. Or a cheese pizza, hold the cheese. That's even funnier. But I have to hold the cheese because, well, I'm allergic to milk. So I have to have goat. I'm not allergic to goat's milk or goat's cheese, but I am allergic to cow's milk and cow's cheese. So I have to be very careful. But it's not about me worrying about this idiom being, taking it literally. I don't do that. But that we have a problem with changing on a dime. We're going around here, we're talking about what is balanced and what is not. And all of a sudden, we're talking about hamburgers and pizza, and then we're talking about this subject, and then we're talking about that subject. And we don't realize that the entire chapter is a single subject and never varies from it. And that's a really good example. Go and read that. Like 22, Exodus 22, I think. Just, I'm guessing. I might be wrong. All right. So now we have a different scenario. This is the good and right place to be breaking this up. So we look at verse 24. It says, O basar ki yiyeh be'oro v'michvat esh ve'haita. Sorry, I got this wacky do in the way. I can't see it. Michyat ha-mikvat ba'heret levana, to the white. Adam demet o levana. All right, so we have a new word here. Maybe just one. Mikvat. Well, that means burnt. It's a place burned, in this case, on the body. Is it something that has caught on fire? No, if you've ever seen anyone who's got a place in their skin where they've been burnt because they got too close to a fire or were in some accident and got burnt or whatever, you know what that skin looks like, right? That probably everybody's seen it, at least an imitation of it in a movie, right? Well, it's the same thing here. It's like we're talking about the skin looks like it has been burned, like a brand, even. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, some skin when it's burnt is lifted up, right? But some of it's not. Some of it, like I've got a burn spot right here. It's just a white line. That's all it is. But that's a burn spot. But we know what a burn looks like, and that's the word here. We're talking about that word. This is a place in the skin that basically it looks burnt. All right. So what this Hebrew text says is or. I don't remember. Oh yeah, it started with O. Remember the Hebrew word O is O-R in English, or. So, or if there, that's how I know it's a new scenario, by the way. Or if there is a hot, burning spot, I think that it could even be a burning sensation in the skin of the flesh. And the living flesh is burnt or burning with a shiny white and very red or white and very red. And it's very red or white. All right. I may have to talk about this a little bit. So, or which means we've got, at the very least, a new variable, maybe a new scenario. To me, the O makes it a new scenario. Or if there is a, let me look at the Hebrew again. Ooh. Okay, so this is more like a burning. I missed esh. This is still sensation would. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with sensation here because this is a hot, burning place in the skin, and we don't go around with fire coming out of our hands. So let's go with sensation. If this is a hot, burning sensation in the skin of the flesh, we always say it that way in Hebrew. It's never just skin. Say skin of the flesh. And I don't remember high. Was that in there? Oh, Haita. Hello. Yeah, okay, so it is there. And the living flesh. Yeah. Or if there is a hot burning sensation in the skin of the flesh, and the living flesh is burning with a shiny white and very red or white. So it's shiny white and very red or very white. So it's shiny white, but it's just way more white here than there ought to be. And remember, the people of this time were predominantly olive skin. Not all of them, by the way. There would have been some white people in this group. Maybe that one's a little iffy. But there would have been olive skin and a bunch of very dark black skinned people. And then because there would have been, without a doubt, mixing of the races, you would have had the brown skinned people. So you've got dark, almost black. If you think about the black race that came from that area, they very, very dark skin. And so you've got everything from the very dark black all the way down to the light browns, all the way down to that olive color skin. And maybe some white people in there. I mean, they conquered all the nations of the known world around there, and the idea that there was no white people there at all, kind of, I don't know. I think there would have been some, but maybe not, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't bother me at all. But so think about that. If their skin is really, really white, you got the shiny spot where the sore is, and obviously it's white beyond that. You follow? So somebody on my skin, even my skin's, I've held that up to, I've got a mixed grandkids, and I've held my arm right up next to a couple of them, and my skin's actually darker than theirs. So you'd see it on a white guy as well, right? But it's more than just a white shiny spot like on say a zit. Uh, this is bigger than that. It's further. It's more outward from the sore than that. It's either going to be really, really red there, or it's really white. But you're looking for the shiny white, and beyond that, the red and or the white. Okay. So, but this is with the burning sensation, because the Hebrew said mikvat esh, and this is vehaita, in the living flesh, mikyat. So hopefully get what I'm saying there. So if there is a burning sensation in that skin, and it's got that really bright white spot with maybe some red or maybe more white than really ought to be there, we got an issue. Now, it hasn't told us what that issue is or what to do about that issue, but we've got an issue. Houston, we got a problem. All right, so let's look at 25. Yeah, I got plenty of time. It says, Ve ra'a ota hakohen. So, right, you got to go to the Kohen and get him to look at it, right? Vehine. Okay. Nechpach Had my ch in the wrong place there. Se'ar, lavan, is white. Baba heret umar'eha amok. You remember that? Min haor zara'at hiv bamichva paracha vetime oto hakohen nega. Zara'at hiv. Sorry, I got this big old mouse and it covers up a bunch of words and I have to move it so I can see what it says. All right, well, we have some new words here, or at least one anyway. Paracha. Breakout, broken out. Oh, it seemed like I think we had this word before, or we had another word that has the same meaning. That often happens. I don't remember. So don't quote me if I say that it's the first time and it isn't. Sorry. But it seemed important to me enough at the time that if we have had it, I think we should look at it, what it means again. It's to break out, to burst forth, used of the young is issuing from the womb, right? But it's used of grass, the grass and plants of every kind breaking forth through the ground. And you know how they'll have a little leaf or something spread out. It's that whole breaking forth thing like that. So I'm pretty sure we've had this word before, but I don't think we've had it in a while, at least not in a week. All right, so my translation, since there's really nothing new here. And the priest looks, and behold, the hair has turned white in the bright spot. Uh-oh. And it appears deeper in this, not deeper, but it appears deep in the skin. It is Zara'at. The burning has broken out, and the priest will proclaim him unclean. The sore is Zara'at. Again, I don't think we're calling it by name. I think we're saying the sore is, what's the word? Contagious. The sore is contagious. And even if it is the name of it, well, the name, I would guess, that word still means contagious, right? Because Hebrew does that. If we name something, we name it according to what it does. Even our names of our people, we do that way. Yov, we know him as Job here in America. Just kidding. Job, right? Yov or Eov. He's called both. It means persecuted, tormented, one who all kinds of bad stuff happened to. His name, right? It's like Moshe means Messiah. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. No, it's not a. There is. That's the funny part. If you know anything about the Coptic language, you know that Moshe does not mean drawn out. It's not part of the Coptic language. But that's what the Jews teach because they don't want anyone to recognize that Moshe was a Mashiach. He wasn't the Mashiach, right? He wasn't the one promised. They didn't exactly have one promised at that point. He's the one that made the promise from, telling his people about it. But his name is derived from Mashiach because he was the one that would draw them out of Egypt. Just saying. Anyway, he was anointed to do the bidding of God, and that made him, basically, if you're a Mashiach, you're the one that's giving the law to the people. Does that make you the Mashiach? No. There's only one, and that's the one that God appoints, and nobody else. But and that will be, as we know from the prophets, that will be a manifestation of God in the flesh. So don't look to me to be your Mashiach. I can be your Moshe, but I'm not your Moshiach. Okay, Mashiach. All right, so what do we have here? We have no new words. If the priest looks and behold, the hair has turned white in the bright spot, and it appears deep in the skin, not deeper, but deep in the skin, it is Zara'at. It is, what's my word? Contagious. Let's say it that way. It is contagious. The burning has broken out, and the priest will proclaim him unclean. The sore is contagious. All right, we can compare that to chapter 13, which is where we are, right? Let's look, what did he say in verse 3? And the priest sees the sore in the flesh of the skin, and the hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears deep in the flesh. Sorry, I forgot that I haven't corrected these that I had done prior to realizing I was using the wrong word. The hair in the sore has turned white, and the sore appears deep in the flesh of the skin. The sore is contagious, Zara'ah, and the priest sees it. He, the person with the sore, is unclean. Right? So, Rob, this must mean that one guy wrote the first part of the chapter and another guy wrote the other part, and some third guy comes along and he just like melds these things together, and I just disappeared from the wacky dude. I'm back. Woohoo! I don't know if y'all saw that, but I saw it. Anyway, I do not remember what I was saying. That was pretty funny to disappear. I've never done that before. I have no idea what I was saying. Do you? See, my wife doesn't even listen to me. I hope it wasn't important. Because there's nothing there. Let's just move on because I have no idea what I was going to talk about. Let me look at it one more time. The sore appears deep in the flesh of the skin. The sore is contagious. Priest sees it. He is, you had this guy back in the 1800s just declared one day. Now, he was not a scholar. He did not have a college degree. He just is reading the Bible, and he's like, there's this one spot in the Bible where it calls God Yahweh, and there's another spot where, well, he said Jehovah because he's reading an English Bible, not a Hebrew Bible. And he says Jehovah, so we'll call that the J text. And the other one says Adonai, so we call that the A text. I don't know. I don't remember the whole nonsensical thing. But immediately, scholars from colleges all over the world just began to teach that nonsense. And I mean, it still persists to this day. It's awful that it's been proven untrue 6 ways to Sunday from Sunday. If you want to understand why does the Bible repeat? Well, there is a man named Umberto Consuto. He's got more. His name is longer than that. It's like Umberto Consuto, the Great One. I don't know. It's a very long name, but look Umberto Consuto up and you'll find him. Look for his writing on Genesis, his commentary on Genesis and Exodus. He didn't live long enough to finish the rest of it, as far as I know. There's nothing printed out beyond those 2 works. He will take you through and by the time you finish reading those 2 books, you will fully understand why the Bible repeats. There is a purpose in it. It is a purposeful writing style. So one place will give you an overview. The next place will give you detail. The next place, in another situation, maybe they give you the detail and then they follow that up with the same detail. Well, why would they do that? Because the first time around is when we're introducing it. So maybe it's detailed, maybe it's not. Usually it's not. Usually it's the overview, and then the next time it's detailed. Sometimes it is detailed, like in this case, verse 3 is detailed. Then we get down to this verse. Darn. You don't know what bad things can come of that. Anyway. Where are we starting here? So in this case, verse 3 had the detail. And then we get down here to whatever verse we're on. I don't even know what number this is. 25. And we get the detail yet again. Now it's a little different than verse 3, not a whole lot, but it's hitting it again. Why? Because we've come so far from verse 3 that you need, if you will, to be reminded so that you'll know what it has to do with where we are right now. And rather than writing see verse 3, since they didn't have chapters and verses in those days, they just wrote it again. They did this on purpose. And there are reasons why they call God Yahweh in some places and call him Adonai in others. There are reasons why he is, because Adonai is Lord. And the Bible does purposely do that. And I'm not talking to get rid of God's proper name. They call him Lord and in some places, and there are reasons for that. They call him by name in others, and there are reasons for that. And so if you'll read Umberto Cassuto's work on Genesis and Exodus, you should, by the time you're finished, you should fully understand why this stuff is written this way. The advantage to this writing is that by this repetition, by the time you get from Exodus chapter 12 to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, you pretty well know your law. You know how to live, and you're not dependent on every moment of the day. Hey, Rabbi, now what was it I was supposed to do or not do in this situation? But believe me, I don't mind answering your questions. It's fun to hear your voice and all that. But by the time you get to the end of it, you'll pretty much know how to live your life. And you know what? Even with that, God told us to go over it every year. Go through it again every year. That is a law. That's part of the law, is that we're supposed to do this every year. Do we get through all of it in a year? No, not the way I do it. And not the way most people do it. It's just there's just too much. We have to explain it. We can't sum up. Anyway, that's backwards of a movie. Let's move on. Right? Do we have? Oh, she's pointing over here. Okay, so we do have time. So verse 26 says, "Ve'im yire'ena hakohen vehine ein balecheret se'ar leben ushefala einena min haor vehiv cheha vehi se giru hakohen shivat yamim." Oh, these lines in here throw me off a little bit. Okay, so again, no new words here. It says, "But if the priest looks and behold, there is no white hair in the bright spot, and it is not lower, deeper, dadgummit, Robert, it is not deep in the other skin, but is dark, the priest will quarantine him for 7 days." Sorry, I didn't think to go in and change the stuff I'd already done by the time because when I started this thing out, I may have talked about that. I think I did, but I don't remember for sure now that I'm saying it. I fell into the same trap that all the other translators fell into and started putting an ER after the word as if there was ever any such thing in Hebrew. And I don't know why. I saw it and I followed it and fell into that same trap. It's not deeper. It's not lower. So but if the priest looks and behold, there is no white hair. So you're seeing that we're a variable of the previous verse. It's not a variable continuation from the verse before. This is a variable of the previous verse. So we're under a new scenario. And so but there is no white hair, because previously there had to be white hair. But there is no white hair in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the other skin, but is dark, because remember the dark was part of all this. The priest will quarantine him for 7 days. So we can compare that to verse 21. "And if the priest looks and behold, none of the hair is white, and the spot is not lowered from the skin," or not lower, it's not deep in the skin. I got to fix that. "And it," speaking of the sore, "has darkened," the priest will quarantine him for 7 days. So our scenario has changed, but it has changed back to something previous, right? We are repeating, and that is on purpose. All right, 27. Ve'ra'ahu hakohen bayom hashivi'i, or shevi'i, paso tifese ba'or ve'time hakohen oto nega zara'at hiv. Okay. Well, again, no new words, because we're in kind of a repeating pattern right now. It says, and in the 7th day, the priest will look, and if it spreads out, spread shall spread. If it spreads out massively, you could even say, in the skin, the Kohen will pronounce him unclean. It is zara'at. It is, what's my word? Contagious. All right, so we can compare that to, where are we, 27? We can compare that to 22. And if it spreads out, spreads shall spread, same thing. In the skin, the Kohen will pronounce him unclean. It is contagious. It is contagious. I guess it might help you in reading the Kasuto stuff if I tell you this, and he says it in his book. There was no chronological order in Hebrew, not even into the point where you get the New Testament letters. The Jews still did not have chronology. Well, what about all of those so-and-so begat so-and-so begat so-and-so? You should read them. They are not in chronological order. People, that's not how Hebrew works. So what we're seeing here is not a chronology. We're seeing... we do this in English. When we start to tell a story, we're saying, well, see, I was walking down the street and this dog came up and it started barking at me, and then this cat ran by and the dog went to chase it and the car hit the dog and the cat went wee. Oh, but before I tell you that, I should let you know that there was a raccoon that jumped down the tree and that distracted the dog. Well, then the story's not in chronological order, is it? So we tell stories and we have to jump back to some thing that we left out, or maybe we feel like we have to explain it because, well, if I don't tell you this piece of the story, then you're not going to understand that piece of the story. So now you're jumping out of chronological order to do that because it has something to do with this spot where we are. And so that's happening right now. We're going back just a couple of verses, and because it's supposed to remind us of this particular variable. We're in a different scenario, but the variable winds up like the one just 2 or 3 verses ahead of place. So we're supposed to be making these connections, which is why when I teach, I always show you what the connection is. I said, well, we can compare that to. That's why I do that, because that's what's happening in this very moment. Hopefully, I hope I made that make sense. Did I read 28?
No.
Okay. Yeah, we probably should go back over here. 28 says, let me get this big mousy thing out of the way. It's messing with me. Ve'im tachteha tahamod ha-baheret lo fashta va'or vehiv cheha se'et ha-michvat hiv veti haro hakohen ki zarevet ha-michvat hiv. For those of you who don't know I read Hebrew funny. I do it on purpose. I'm trying to make sure that the students who are coming up and trying to catch on to the words and learn them and all that, I'm pronouncing them very pronounced syllable by syllable so that people a better understanding. They can hear the word better if they're not, say, fluent Hebrew or they're at the beginning stages of learning it or whatever. Plus, I'm trying to do it according to the way Hebrew was spoken when these words were written, not the way Hebrew is spoken now. Hebrew has become a very slanged out language, and we don't pronounce sounds that we used to. So I'm doing it this way very much on purpose. Anyway, what that says in English, since there's no new words here for us, and if what? I put in the little square brackets, the infection, so that we know what we're talking about. And if the infection under the bright spot does not change, it shall stand, it does not change, and does not spread in the skin. Sound familiar? Even if, I had to add those words to make this make sense, the dark spot is raised, uh, the priest will pronounce it clean because it is a mark caused by the scar. Hopefully you're following what I'm saying. The mark is caused by the scar. So here we've like cleaned it, we've brought it all to an end, if you will. The infection under the bright spot, it does not change. Remember, he's been quarantined. And 7 days have now passed. The Cohen, the priest, has taken a look at it. He said, well, it hasn't changed. It looks exactly like it did 7 days ago. It has not spread in the skin. Hasn't spread out across the skin. And let's see, and the dark spot has not become a raised spot. The depths, it doesn't, first off, it didn't look like it was deep in the skin. And now that, what was that word I used for not referring to deep in the skin? Superficial. It wasn't deep in the skin. It was appearing superficial. I probably should go back and change that part of the translation to an idiom. Superficial is what they mean by not deep in the skin. But but it hasn't raised, because if it raises, that changes things, right? That jumps us up to a different variable. So right now we're looking at, well, it hasn't raised, it hasn't spread, it hasn't changed in any way, it has not raised. Well, then that means, now my mouse is not working at all, that means that the priest is going to pronounce this man clean, because the mark on this person is a scar. So, well, I can look at a scar and know what a scar looks like. Obviously not with this skin thing. Obviously, the disease itself kind of looks like a scar. Y'all follow me? All right. That is as far as I am able to go today. I know we have some time left, but sorry. Shalom ve shalom, y'all.